Hi everybody. Yesterday, Sunday afternoon, the Christmas lights were switched on in Skipton and they look spectacular as ever. And I've been in Leeds recently and the trees are decorated and all the lights are on and it's incredibly impressive. And as you drive along, it's very easy to get your attention distracted by these amazing light displays that people put out there nowadays. And it made me think that actually at Christmas it's very, very easy in this kind of festive time to get distracted. And so tomorrow we are embarking on a journey to try and kind of counteract that. We're going to start a journey through Luke's Gospel. And I wish there was some great, profound inspiration, almost akin to the angel Gabriel appearing and saying, this is a good idea. But for a couple of reasons we thought this would be a good thing to do. First of all, it's just the obvious thing. Christmas, Advent, it's all about Jesus. And so while we can easily get distracted, how about we actually make a decision from the outset at Advent to focus on Jesus? That was one one reason. The second thing, it's an eminently practical one, is that from tomorrow there are 24 days till Christmas. You'll know because I'm sure you've got your Advent calendars up, all ready to go tomorrow with your little chocolate hidden behind a piece of foil. And what's interesting is, as well as 24 days till Christmas, there are 24 chapters in Luke. Now, it's been suggested we should turn it around and do Luke in reverse and start on chapter 24. And then by the time we get to Christmas Eve, we'll be talking about Jesus' birth again. And whilst I understand the logic behind that, I suppose there's a concern that even our worship can almost be seasonalized by the Christmas festivities. And instead of approaching the big day with turkey and presents and the Queen's speech and Christmas specials, instead we will be reading a chapter a day from Luke's Gospel, from his conception and birth through his life, his death, and into his resurrection. We'll be doing it without tinsel, without fairy lights, but instead we'll be reading about people with problems, with worries, with insecurities, with illnesses, the forgotten, the oppressed, those in power and those not in power, meeting and experiencing and encountering Jesus and engaging with who he is. Right up to Christmas Eve, when instead of reading about his birth in a manger, we'll instead be reading about a new birth, about his resurrection from the dead. Now, what better way to count down to Christmas than to spend each day focusing on Jesus? So if you're willing to be involved in this journey through Luke's Gospel as we follow through Advent for the 24 days of Advent, I really want to encourage you. What we're planning on doing is reading one chapter a day. And it's very easy because whatever the date is, that's the chapter we're going to be looking at. So the idea is read that chapter, think about it yourself, maybe even take a few notes down, maybe grab yourself a copy of Luke's Gospel. We've got a few of these still at church. Take your copy and read your chapter and note down what strikes you about Jesus in this chapter. What is it that moves you, confuses you, inspires you? Any questions you've got, any insights that you've got, note them down and journey through Luke's Gospel. Alongside that, each day, we are going to be uploading a video reflection from different people in the church on that chapter. Just a thought that occurs to them based on just reading that chapter. They'll also provide maybe a couple of questions for you to think about going onwards and a prayer to wrap things up. So it's hopefully just be about 5-minute devotional each day. So you have the chapter of Luke, your reflections on what God might be saying by his Holy Spirit to you. You'll be hearing some offerings from other people. That's going to be on our YouTube channel and also hopefully on our social media places as well, on Facebook. And just an opportunity to reflect on Jesus as we journey through Advent and through Luke's Gospel. As we begin our journey through Luke's Gospel over the next 24 days and the next 24 chapters, as we explore and learn more about Jesus on this run up to Christmas, I thought it would be useful just to have a little bit of background information about the Gospel of Luke. We believe it was written around the year 60, 62, maybe even earlier than that, by a guy called Luke, who was a companion of Paul's on his journeys. Certainly we read about it about Luke in Acts 20. We gather that the story goes from telling a story by Paul to saying, we did this. So we think that that's whenever Luke joined the journey, because he's also the author of Acts. If you want to think of Luke Acts as part 1 and part 2, one's the first movie, the next one's the sequel of the whole story of the gospel and the birth of the church. Luke, the doctor, wrote them both. And Luke, the gospel, being the first one that he wrote. He was a Gentile doctor, we believe. We hear about Paul mentioning him in Colossians, in 2 Timothy, and also in Philemon. And the interesting thing about Luke's gospel is that, contrary to a lot of other things, he makes an admission at the very, very start of his gospel, maybe one that you don't expect. He essentially says, I wasn't there. Because he says that he found out all the information in his gospel from other sources, from eyewitnesses, people who'd seen what had happened. And this might be a bit strange. At the very outset of writing, he's saying, I wasn't there, I didn't see it myself. But he does say, I carried out a careful investigation from these eyewitnesses and from other accounts as to what happened. And some of these eyewitnesses, include perhaps even Mary herself, who gave him the birth stories, the birth narratives. So we know that. We know that Mary was in Ephesus around a similar kind of time that Luke would have been around. It says he investigated everything. A lot of Luke's gospel has a lot of Mark's gospel in there. We also know that Mark was a companion of Paul's at the time. And what Luke is trying to do, he's putting all this information together, and he says, I'm trying to write an orderly account, not necessarily chronologically accurate, but an orderly account so that you can understand what is going on. He addresses it to a person or a community called Theophilus, which means one who loves God. It may be a person, it may be a community. And it's all about certainty. It's about knowing that what you believe has a real foundation in history, in facts. Certainty, that's an interesting thing, because there's a lot of myths and legends that be around at this time, but Luke is remarkable in the sense he wants to put down some facts so people know that what they believe was rooted in reality and in history. Now, not everybody's agreed with that over many, many years. A lot of biblical scholars have questioned about how accurate Luke is. In fact, one person was a guy called William Ramsay in the 19th century. He was a historian and an archaeologist, and he didn't believe the New Testament was really that accurate. He didn't think that Luke or Acts really reflected what was going on at the time. But he went for an archaeological trip to the Holy Land and was committed to finding out where Luke and Acts fell down historically. And instead, he came back with two revelations. First of all, he said that Luke, the things that he discovered, he found out that Luke was actually remarkably accurate in all its historical first century context. In fact, he described Luke as being among a historian of the first rank. That's what he thought. And he returned a believer. He came back. This is the second thing. He came back saying these are reliable historical documents. Luke and Acts, they reflect the real situation at the time. And so we can take Luke's gospel and we can take what he intended. He wanted to put down an account which was rooted in eyewitness, real story and experience. We can take this as a accurate historical document, and we can have certainty, as Luke said, of the things that we have been taught. So as we journey through Luke's gospel, let's not just think of it as a story. Let's think of it, this is a historic document, documenting eyewitness experiences of people who knew and walked with Jesus in his birth, in his life, his teachings, and also in his death and his resurrection. And may that be a real springboard into our knowledge and experience of Jesus for ourselves. God bless you as you journey through Luke together with us.